society for people. But we didn't see that. We saw it more and more turning right-wing, being more and more capitalistic. And we wanted to describe this.
And I think in the books you reveal the feeling that the police force in particular and the government as a whole was rooted rather in the militaristic tradition rather than a civil tradition. Would you say that was true?
Yes.
So that the police was a bit like an army?
Yeah. They became more and more militant. And in a way, there were things happening in the 60s, like this, English.
Say it in Swedish, I'll understand.
Norrmalmstorgsdramat, the bank in middle of Stockholm.
The central bank? Yes.
Yeah, and the robbers, they call it the Stockholm syndrome.
Right. Right.
You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
And at that time, the police became more and more militant. At the same time as they acted as a small town police force, but confused and not being exactly very good at handling all these techniques. But it grew more and more so.
And so where and when did you meet Per?
We met because we worked in the same publishing house as journalists for weekly magazines. And the first time I met him, I was working in a book publishing house. And I needed someone to translate 2 short stories of, what's his name, Father Brown stories. And I heard about this guy, Per Sjöwall, who was a very good journalist and also was a good translator. So then I met him.
Okay.
And then we met again, and again, and again, and so on.
And so you were a left-wing journalist concerned with social justice, making your point. And the way the legend has it, and you tell me whether this is true or not, the legend has it, in order to more effectively communicate those political points, you decided to illustrate them in a series of crime fiction. Was it that simple?
Well, that's simple. It was not that simple, but it was part of it. Because Per had already written 3 political novels. The first one was about a football team in southern Sweden, but it was kind of a Swedish, not copy, but he was inspired by Robert Van Warren, All the King's Men.
Right.
And the second one was about, he was living in Spain and under a Franco time. So that was about a story, love story in Spain, about a former Nazi soldier who met a Jewish Spanish girl, and it was called The Wind and the Rain. And the third one was called The Lorry and was about guerrilla in Spain. So those books didn't sell very much. But we realized that Agatha Christie, for example, sold some more copies, and that we wanted to write something that had that was entertaining.
Sure, that worked as entertainment.
Entertainment. We wanted to make entertainment and bake into that what we wanted to talk about. Yeah. So that was the idea from the start. And we also realized that there were no police novels in Sweden. Nobody wrote about police.
Why was that, do you think?
I don't know. The place is very closed, a very closed system.
What crime fiction had you read before you started writing them?
Well, we both were very fond of Raymond Chandler.
Right.
And we read Dashed Hand. And also George Simenon.
Right. Well, Simenon I can understand because I can see a connection possibly between Simenon, between Maigret and Beck.
Yeah.
But the Raymond Chandler and the Dashiell Hammett, surely not. That they would not lead naturally to Martin Beck.
No, not at all.
So that was, plus your books have coherent plots, whereas some of the Raymond Chandlers famously don't.
But we didn't want to write exactly like someone else. We wanted to write our own. And what we wanted was to, which was difficult to describe, police work, because it was a very closed organization. I mean, now you can go to the public translation man in the police force and ask and get information about everything. But we couldn't do that at that time, so we had to guess a lot. And but we wanted to write about real policemen, and our idea was not to have a hero, but a team.
I was struck by that it was possibly, if you could say that Maigret is semi-realistic in as much as he had a family life and so on and so forth. He had a wife, yeah. And actually, Jules Maigret was faithful to his wife. Which is not true of Simenon himself. So that just shows that you don't necessarily write what you know. But Martin, it always struck me, the first book, which in English is titled Rosanna, it begins with an absolute thicket of bureaucracy. That it's pages and pages and pages of even trying to get the dredger ordered up for the harbour. So you really went into it with a sense of utter realism for what it was really like, which I still feel, I'm not an expert as much as some of the people here about the history of crime fiction, but it was radically new and different to do it that way. Were you conscious of that, of setting out to do something that hadn't been done before?
Yeah, in a way we thought, we compared books. Crime books were not a very big thing at that time, which it is now. But most crime novels in Sweden were very bourgeois. It was always not a policeman, but some kind of an amateur photographer or who kind of stumbled over bodies all the time. And
well, that's true.
We wanted to do it realistic. And I know people who say, how do you write so slow books? Nothing happens in your books. But it doesn't in reality.
Exactly, yeah.
It takes its time to do the work, and it takes also not one man, but a team.
And the team is fantastic in those books. Had you read, I mean, here again I'm illustrating my ignorance of the exact chronology of crime fiction, had you read Ed McBain?
Of course.
At that time?
Because when our second book was published, some reviewer wrote, they write almost like Ed McBain. We never heard about him.
Because it was that ensemble of tremendous characters.
Yeah, he has the same. But we had already started our series when we read Ed McBain.
Right.
And we are always compared with him, and we are always said to be inspired by him. But of course we read Ed McBain when we read this interview, and we called our publisher